India, 1,944. The air on the tarmac shimmered with heat, rippling like liquid metal under the afternoon sun. Mechanics in sweat-soaked khakis scrambled across the runway, shouting over the deafening roar of 4 massive radial engines coughing to life. The ground shook as if the earth itself were groaning beneath the weight of what sat at the end of the strip. Towering above them all, its silver fuselage gleaming against the sky, stood a machine no one had ever seen before, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. It wasn't just big, it was impossible. 100 feet from nose to tail, with a wingspan wider than a 4-lane highway, the plane seemed less like an aircraft and more like something from a fever dream, a ship that could sail the edge of the atmosphere itself. A young American pilot, barely 24, stood by the nose, wiping oil from his hands as the propellers spun up. He stared at the cockpit, its smooth, bubble-like canopy sealed shut. "It's not a bomber," he muttered. "It's a flying city." And he wasn't exaggerating. Inside were 11 crew members, each in their own pressurized compartment, connected by an aluminum tunnel that snaked above 2 cavernous bomb bays. They wore no oxygen masks. The cabin was sealed, like a submarine turned inside out. Above them, engineers called the design Project 345. To the crews who would soon fly it over the Pacific, it was simply the Superfortress. When the B-29 first rolled out, even seasoned Air Corps officers were stunned. It flew higher than any fighter, faster than most interceptors, and carried twice the bomb load of anything before it. It could fly from India to Tokyo and back, a range so vast that some believed the numbers were fiction. But the real secret wasn't its speed or its size. It was what made it fly at all. Because deep inside the belly of that plane, hidden behind panels of riveted aluminum, was something no other aircraft in the world had. A computer, not the kind made of silicon or code, but a maze of gears, gyros, servos, and electric relays, a mechanical brain that could do the math faster than any human could. The B-29 wasn't just a plane. It was the first aircraft that thought. When its wheels left the ground that day, the men below could hardly believe it. They watched it rise, higher and higher, until the silver wings cut across the sun and vanished into the clouds, a metallic ghost, powered by human ambition and something dangerously close to intelligence. In that moment, none of them knew what it would go on to do, how it would change the nature of war and the future of technology forever. But one thing was certain. The B-29 was unlike anything that had ever flown before. And for the first time, man had built a machine so advanced, it couldn't fly without thinking for itself. To understand why the B-29 existed, you have to go back to 1939, before America was even at war. Across the Atlantic, Europe was burning. Hitler's blitzkrieg rolled over Poland and France. The Luftwaffe ruled the skies, and London trembled under waves of German bombers. The world had seen the future of warfare, and it came from above. In Washington, one man saw what was coming long before the rest. His name was General Henry Hap Arnold. Arnold wasn't just a soldier, he was a visionary. He believed air power would decide the next war, not battleships or tanks. And he knew that to win across oceans, America would need something the world had never built before. A bomber that could strike anywhere on Earth, from bases half a world away. In late 1939, Arnold summoned the engineers at Boeing. He told them to forget everything they knew about aircraft design. He wanted a plane that could fly 3,000 miles without refueling, at 30,000 feet, carrying 20,000 pounds of bombs, and do it all at speeds faster than 350 miles per hour. At the time, that was like asking someone to build a car that could drive to the moon. But Boeing said yes. Inside a hangar in Seattle, a handful of engineers began sketching what they called Model 345. They worked behind locked doors, guarded by military police. Even other Boeing employees weren't allowed to see it. They knew they weren't just building a bomber, they were building the future of flight. The first challenge was the engines. Nothing existed that could lift something that heavy, that high. for that long. So they built their own, the Wright R-3000, 350 duplex Cyclone. Each one generated over 2,200 horsepower, enough to spin a propeller nearly 13 feet across. But the power came with a price: heat. So much heat, in fact, that the first prototypes literally caught fire mid-air. The next challenge was the air itself. At 30,000 feet, the temperature drops below zero, and the air is too thin to breathe. Existing bombers like the B-29 used oxygen masks and open windows for their gunners. But Arnold wanted something new, a pressurized cabin, just like in a submarine, only in reverse. To make that possible, Boeing had to invent a way to seal the fuselage completely. Rivets, hatches, even gun turrets had to be redesigned to hold pressure without bursting. The engineers joked that it was like trying to build a balloon made of steel, but they did it. And in doing so, they created the first true pressurized aircraft in history, years before commercial airliners would use the same technology. Still, even with its sealed cabin, powerful engines, and massive frame, the B-29 faced one last, unsolvable problem: coordination. 11 men, 5 remote-controlled gun turrets, and 4 engines all needed to work in perfect harmony. Human reflexes weren't fast enough. Manual aiming was too slow. And in the chaos of combat, no crew could possibly react quickly enough to enemy fighters coming from every direction. So Boeing and the engineers at General Electric proposed something revolutionary. What if the gunners didn't fire their guns directly? What if they aimed through a sight, and a machine, a mechanical brain, handled the calculations instantly? That was the birth of the idea that would make the B-29 more than a bomber. It would make it the first smart warplane ever built. By 1942, as the Pacific turned red with war, the project consumed millions of dollars and tens of thousands of man-hours. Factories in Wichita, Omaha, and Seattle ran day and night. Arnold called it the greatest gamble in aviation history. And when the first test flight finally succeeded, climbing smoothly into the clouds at 32,000 feet, witnesses said it felt like watching a new era begin. The B-29 wasn't just an airplane. It was a declaration that America would not only win the skies, but redefine what it meant to fly. When most people think of World War II, they think of bullets, tanks, and steel, not computers. But long before digital circuits and silicon chips, a handful of engineers built something mechanical that could think. And they built it for one purpose: to make the B-29 Superfortress untouchable. It was called the Central Fire Control System, or CFCS, a machine so complex that even its inventors struggled to explain it. To the men who flew with it, it was simply the brain. The idea came from a desperate need. Earlier bombers, like the B-17 Flying Fortress, bristled with gun turrets. Each gunner manned his own station: the tail, the waist, the nose, shouting directions, and firing manually. It worked, but barely. In high-altitude combat, human coordination broke down. Gunners couldn't see through the smoke and clouds. Their hands froze to metal handles in the cold, and by the time they lined up a target, the enemy was already gone. The B-29's engineers wanted something better, something that could think faster than a man's eyes or hands. General Electric was brought in to make it happen. Their solution: mount 5 remote-controlled turrets around the plane, each carrying twin, 50-caliber Browning machine guns, and link them all to a network of optical sights, gyroscopes, and servo motors. But the magic wasn't in the guns. It was in the math. Inside, the heart of the plane sat a box of gears and relays that could take the gunner's sight line, the target's speed, the plane's airspeed, and the angle of attack, and compute an exact firing solution in a fraction of a second. It wasn't just automation, it was prediction. You'd lock onto a fighter at 2 o'clock high, one veteran recalled, and the system would already know where to fire before you even squeezed the trigger. The machine did all the work. It tracked, aimed, and stabilized. A gunner could sit anywhere in the pressurized cabin, looking through a plexiglass bubble, and control guns located 50 feet away, outside the fuselage. Each gunner could even take over another turret if his crewmate went down. The CFCS decided, automatically, which guns had the best line of fire and reassigned control to maximize coverage. That had never been done before. This was 1943, and the B-29 already had a networked, computer-assisted defense system decades ahead of its time. The analog brain behind it was a maze of 10,000 tiny parts: synchros, gyros, servo amplifiers, ball bearings, and precision cams. The machine took raw physics, wind drift, lead angle, target velocity, and turned it into one thing that mattered: where the bullet needed to be. Every time a gunner squeezed the trigger, he wasn't just firing metal. He was commanding a computer. Pilots joked that the plane was smarter than they were. Mechanics called it a monster. But in battle, that monster worked. Enemy pilots over Japan learned quickly attacking a B-29 head-on was suicide. Its guns didn't miss. The CFCS could calculate lead angles too fast for any human to counter. Even when one turret jammed or was destroyed, the others kept fighting, automatically adjusting. It was like the plane had a mind of its own. At 30,000 feet, above the freezing blue of the Pacific, a crew could barely see their attackers, tiny black dots spiraling upward. But when the gunners looked through their sights, the computer came alive. Electric motors whirring, crosshairs sliding into place, and a second later, silver tracers lit up the sky. The B-29 didn't just fight back. It fought back intelligently. And for the first time in history, man had built a machine that didn't just obey, it decided. Building the B-29 wasn't just about strength. It was about precision. An obsession with detail so extreme that Boeing had to invent new kinds of engineering to make it real. Every inch of its aluminum skin, every rivet, every cable had to function perfectly under conditions no aircraft had ever survived before. At 30,000 feet, air pressure drops to less than a third of what it is on the ground. Temperatures fall to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body shuts down in minutes without oxygen. And yet, the B-29 crew sat comfortably in shirt sleeves, drinking coffee, as if flying in a luxury liner. That miracle came from its pressurized cabin, the first of its kind. It was designed like a submarine flipped inside out, strong enough to hold air in instead of keeping water out. Engineers had to rethink everything. Doors became airlocks. Windows were double-layered plexiglass. Even gun turrets had rubber-sealed bearings so the pressure wouldn't leak. The B-29 had two pressurized sections, one in the nose and one in the tail. Between them, a narrow aluminum tunnel curved through the bomb bays, a tube barely 3 feet wide. Crew members crawled through it to reach the rear of the aircraft, floating above 20,000 pounds of bombs in thin air. It felt like crawling through the inside of a torpedo, a gunner later said. You could hear the bombs rattling below you and the engines roaring behind. You just prayed that tunnel would hold. Every system inside the plane had to work automatically because manual operation wasn't possible at such altitude. The B-29's electrical network stretched over 3 miles of wiring, connecting hundreds of relays, lights, motors, and controls. It was, effectively, the first digital nervous system in an airplane. And at the center of it all was a single pilot's yoke linked not just by cables, but by electrical signals that powered hydraulic boosters. The B-29 didn't rely on muscle. It relied on circuits. Even its engines were controlled remotely, through complex wiring that allowed engineers to adjust mixtures, cowl flaps, and fuel flow from inside the cabin. It was revolutionary and terrifying. A single short circuit could kill 11 men. A failed pressure seal could suck the air from the cabin in seconds. Every flight was a test not only of human courage, but of the limits of technology. But when it worked, when all 4 engines roared in sync, the cabin held steady, and the radar screens hummed to life. It was like flying inside the future. At night, from the ground below, Japanese civilians described the B-29 seconds as silver ghosts, silent until they were overhead, gliding through the stratosphere where no fighter could reach. They dropped their bombs not by sight, but by radar, guided by onboard computers that could see through clouds. To the crews inside, the world below looked like a map, flat, distant, unreal. They weren't just flying machines anymore. They were part of a system, an early, mechanical version of the networked warfare that would define the next century. The B-29 didn't just push the limits of flight. It invented them. And for the men who flew it, the line between man and machine began to blur. By mid-1944, the B-29 Superfortress was ready, at least on paper. But no machine that advanced ever reached perfection easily. Its engines, the massive Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclones, were as powerful as they were temperamental. Each one churned out 2,200 horsepower, but they burned so hot that the cylinders often cracked or caught fire in midair. Early crews gave the engines nicknames: the Torch, the Killer, the Widowmaker, and they weren't exaggerating. Test pilots watched helplessly as glowing exhaust flames crawled up the nacelles, licking at the wings. Some managed to feather the propellers and limp home on 3 engines. Others didn't make it. One engineer described it bluntly: "You didn't fly a B-29, you negotiated with it." Yet when it worked, nothing else came close. From newly built bases in India, China, and the Mariana Islands, the B-29 seconds began their bombing campaign against Japan, flying distances no bomber had ever attempted. Some missions stretched over 3,000 miles round trip, across open ocean, at altitudes above 30,000 feet. Inside the pressurized cabin, the crew sat surrounded by blinking lights and whirring instruments, each man sealed inside a world of machinery. To them, the war wasn't gunfire, and shouting it was switches, dials, and radio codes. At that height, the air was too thin for the human voice to carry, so they relied on intercoms, tinny voices echoing through static. The heat from the engines barely reached them. Their breath crystallized on the inside of their oxygen masks, and beneath them, entire cities slept, unaware that they were being watched from 6 miles above. Early missions didn't go well. The B-29's high-altitude bombing runs proved inaccurate. The jet streams over Japan threw off bomb trajectories, scattering payloads miles from their targets. The flying computer was powerful, but it wasn't perfect. General Curtis LeMay, the hard-edged commander of the XXI Bomber Command, made a brutal decision: bring the B-29 seconds lower. If the air currents ruined accuracy at 30,000 feet, then they'd go to 5,000. If high-altitude precision failed, they'd switch to fire. In the spring of 1945, the B-29 campaign changed everything. The bomb bays were filled not with high explosives, but with incendiary clusters, hundreds of small magnesium and napalm bombs designed to ignite wooden cities. At 2 a.m. on March 9, 1945, over Tokyo, 334 B-29 seconds roared in from the Pacific. They flew so low that the pilots could see the glow of paper lanterns below. Each aircraft dropped tons of firebombs that burst in midair, raining molten fuel across miles of urban sprawl. The city ignited instantly. Winds whipped into a firestorm so fierce that it melted asphalt and sucked oxygen from the streets. People were incinerated where they stood or suffocated in underground shelters as the flames consumed every molecule of air. In just one night, 100,000 people died, more than in any single air raid in human history. From their cockpits, the B-29 crews watched Tokyo turn into a single, swirling furnace. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They just flew home in silence. Through the orange haze, the smell of burned oil mixing with the metallic tang of guilt. One gunner later said, "It looked like hell was breaking through the clouds. And we were the ones who opened it." The B-29 had fulfilled its design to fly farther, higher, and strike harder than any bomber before. But in doing so, it changed what war itself meant. By the summer of 1945, Japan was in ruins, its cities shattered, its air force gone. But the war still dragged on. The Japanese military refused to surrender. American planners feared that a full invasion of the home islands would cost 1 million lives. So, in the deserts of New Mexico, another kind of project was reaching completion. One that would make even the B-29's firestorms look small. It was called the Manhattan Project. In July 1945, after the first atomic test at Trinity, the U.S. Army selected one specific group of B-29 seconds to deliver the weapon. They were modified under a top-secret program known as Silver Plate. These planes were stripped of their defensive guns to save weight, fitted with new bomb bays, and flown by hand-picked crews trained in secrecy. At their base on Tinian Island, 2 of those aircraft were prepared for missions that would end the most devastating war in human history. On the 6th of August 1945, Enola Gay lifted off at 2:45 a.m. It was an unusually quiet morning. The crew, 12 men, went through their checklist as if it were any other flight. The bomb, a 9,700-pound uranium device nicknamed Little Boy, hung in the bay below them, attached to a single release hook. The plane climbed steadily toward Japan. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb bay doors opened over Hiroshima. The bombardier released the payload, and 43 seconds later, the sky turned white. The blast vaporized 70,000 people instantly. Another 70,000 would die in the weeks that followed. 3 days later, another B-29 boxcar carried the second bomb, Fat Man. This time, the target was Nagasaki. When the mushroom cloud rose into the sky on August 9th, the world changed forever. The Japanese government surrendered 6 days later, and the age of atomic warfare began. Inside the cockpit of boxcar, the crew sat in silence. They had trained for the mission for months, but none of them truly believed they would use the bomb until it was gone. One co-pilot wrote in his logbook that night, "My God, what have we done?" The B-29 had become more than a bomber. It was a vessel of history, the machine that carried humanity across the threshold between one world and the next. It was the last of the analog giants and the first of the modern age, a plane that combined the raw mechanics of war with the cold precision of computation. Even after the war, its legacy didn't fade. The B-29's design directly influenced the next generation of aircraft, the B-50, the B-47, and even the B-52 Superfortress that still flies today. And perhaps more than any other aircraft, it symbolized the moment when humans realized that technology could not only save them, but also end them. The B-29 was the machine that ended the war and began the world we live in now. The B-29 didn't fade quietly into history. When the war ended, thousands of them stood lined up in neat, ghostly rows across airfields in Guam, Tinian, and Kansas, their polished aluminum skins glinting in the sun, their engines silent. Some were scrapped for metal, some were cannibalized for parts. But a few, the best maintained, the most advanced, were kept flying. Because America knew the future was uncertain. The Soviet Union, once an ally, was already turning into an adversary. And in 1949, when the Soviets detonated their first atomic bomb years ahead of what US intelligence predicted, it became clear that the world had entered a new kind of war, the Cold War. The B-29 seconds were suddenly in demand again. They became strategic reconnaissance aircraft, flying along the edges of Soviet airspace. Their cameras, massive, high-resolution devices, recorded airfields, radar sites, and naval bases from 30,000 feet. But there was another twist to the story, one that still sounds like a scene from a Cold War spy film. In 1944, 3 B-29 seconds, damaged during bombing runs over Japan, had been forced to land in the Soviet Far East. Per wartime agreements, the Soviets were supposed to return the planes, but instead, they quietly copied them. Engineers at the Tupolev Design Bureau took the American machines apart, piece by piece, measuring every bolt, tracing every wire, replicating every instrument. The result was the Tupolev Tu-4, an almost identical Soviet clone of the B-29. When the first Tu-4 seconds rolled across Red Square in 1947, American observers were stunned. They looked exactly like superfortresses right down to the paint. It was the start of an arms race, not of men, but of machines. The B-29's design had set the template for the nuclear age. Long-range, high-altitude bombers carrying weapons of unimaginable power. And as technology advanced, as transistors replaced vacuum tubes, as analog dials gave way to digital displays, the B-29's computer brain evolved too. The central fire control system, once powered by gyros and relays, became the ancestor of the fully electronic guidance and fire systems that would define the jet age. From the B-47 Stratojet to the B-52 Superfortress, you could trace their lineage straight back to that aluminum giant that had first flown over the Pacific, the B-29 Superfortress. But no matter how advanced the technology became, no bomber ever carried the same weight of history. Because every pilot, every gunner, every engineer who touched a B-29 knew what it had done and what it had made possible. They had flown the machine that ended the last World War and opened the door to the next one. Today, a handful of B-29 seconds still exist, restored to flying condition by teams of passionate volunteers. One of them is Doc, meticulously rebuilt over 16 years in Wichita, Kansas, the same city where the original fleet had been born. Another is Fifi, operated by the Commemorative Air Force, still roaring through the skies at air shows across America. When you stand beneath one of those aircraft today, the first thing you notice is the sound. The deep, rhythmic rumble of the 4 Cyclone engines feels like a living heartbeat, a metallic echo from another century. The fuselage gleams like liquid mercury. The cockpit windows catch the light like eyes. And for a moment, you can almost see the silhouettes of the 11 men who once sat inside the Navigator, tracing lines across his map. The bombardier staring down the Norden sight. The pilot gripping the yoke with white-knuckled hands as flak burst outside. It's beautiful. It's terrible. It's history made of steel and fire. The B-29 was more than just a plane. It was the first machine that showed what humanity could do when it fused creativity, ambition, and fear into one unstoppable force. It represented the best of human ingenuity and the darkest side of human purpose. When John T. Thompson had envisioned the trench broom in 1918, he had dreamed of saving soldiers from dying in mud. When Boeing engineers built the B-29, they dreamed of ending a war faster, cleaner, smarter. But every great invention carries a shadow. The B-29's shadow was nuclear fire. It forced humanity to face a question we still haven't fully answered. If our machines can outpace our morality, what will guide them? In that way, the B-29 wasn't just a bomber, it was a prophecy. A prophecy that we would keep building faster, higher, smarter machines, until one day, we might no longer be able to control them. And perhaps that's why, when Fifi takes off from the runway today, its silver wings flashing in the sunlight, the crowd doesn't just cheer. They go silent for a second. Because that sound, that deep thunder rolling across the sky, isn't just an echo of history. It's a reminder that once, a machine so advanced it needed a computer to fly didn't just change the course of a war. It changed the course of humanity itself.